The morning had started like any other for Cassandra Monroe, though somewhere deep down, she knew today would be the day everything changed. She could feel it in her bones the moment she opened her eyes at 5 a.m., when the city outside her penthouse window was still dark and hushed. She sipped her coffee in silence, staring at the skyline she'd once dreamed of conquering. Now, she owned a piece of it. At 42, Cassandra was one of the youngest black women to lead a billion-dollar firm in the city, an empire she built with equal parts vision and unyielding discipline. But behind the glass walls and polished smiles, she knew the vultures had begun to circle. Her company, Monarch Global Holdings, had grown too fast for the comfort of some. Old guard executives whispered behind closed doors, convinced she didn't belong in the seat she'd fought tooth and nail to claim. Today, she would face them. Today, she would remind them exactly who she was. She arrived at the corporate headquarters at exactly 7:30 a.m., dressed in a tailored charcoal suit and a crisp white blouse, her hair pulled back in a bun that radiated both elegance and precision. She stepped out of her black sedan, heels clicking against the marble entrance, her leather briefcase in hand. But the moment she pushed through the revolving door, she felt it, the tension, thick as wet wool. Two security guards she'd never seen before flanked the front desk, eyeing her with a mix of confusion and disdain. Behind them, the receptionist, a young man who'd only been hired last month, stiffened when he saw her approach. "Good morning, Ms. Monroe," he stammered, voice wobbling like a candle in the wind. Before she could reply, one of the guards stepped forward, blocking her path to the elevator. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, emphasizing ma'am like it was a burden to his tongue. "I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside." Cassandra raised an eyebrow, calm but sharp. "Wait outside," she echoed. "I don't think you know who you're talking to." The guard shifted his weight, his expression flat but his eyes wary. "Orders from upper management, ma'am. There's an emergency meeting in progress. No guests are allowed inside." "Guests," she repeated, a hint of amusement flickering across her features. She could feel the receptionist shrinking behind the desk, pretending to type something to avoid the blast radius. "I'm not a guest," Cassandra said, her voice steady, low, lethal. "I own this building. And everyone in it." The guard didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, but you'll have to step outside until someone comes down for you." For a moment, Cassandra just stared at him, not really seeing the guard, but the rotten root behind him. The ones upstairs who thought they could play her like a piece on their chessboard. She'd heard the rumors that the CFO and a handful of old-timers had been scheming to undermine her, to force her out with a vote of no confidence. They thought if they locked the doors and made her wait like an intruder, she'd feel powerless. She exhaled, just once, then offered the guard a small, chilly smile. "Very well," she said. "I'll wait outside." She turned on her heel and walked back through the revolving door, heels echoing like a metronome of her own resolve. She stepped into the soft morning sunlight, the city already humming with taxis and buses and pedestrians with heads bent to their screens. Cassandra checked her watch. 7:41 a.m. She opened her briefcase, pulled out her phone, and dialed one number. It rang once. Twice. "Marisol," she said when her chief of staff picked up. "Get down here. Now. Bring the documents." Marisol's voice was crisp. "Yes, ma'am." 10 minutes later, Cassandra was no longer alone. Marisol appeared by her side, breathless but composed, a stack of legal folders tucked under her arm. She handed Cassandra a tablet, her fingers trembling just slightly. "It's all here," Marisol said. "Board signatures, emergency powers, the severance agreements, everything." Cassandra took the tablet, eyes flicking across the screen. All her ducks in a row, lined up like obedient soldiers. She had prepared for this. She had always known it would come down to this. "Good," Cassandra said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Time to clean house." She stepped back through the revolving doors, Marisol at her side, the guard straightening as they saw her approach. Cassandra didn't slow down. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't break stride. "Move," she said. And they did, because something in her eyes told them she wasn't asking. Inside, the receptionist looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. Cassandra offered him a nod, almost sympathetic. He was just a pawn. Up the elevator they rode in silence, Marisol stealing glances at Cassandra's reflection in the polished chrome walls. The CEO's eyes were steel, her lips set in a line that would not be moved. Somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the rage and betrayal, there was something else, relief. Relief that she could finally do what needed to be done. When the elevator doors slid open on the 32nd floor, Cassandra was greeted with a wall of silence. The hallway leading to the executive boardroom was empty, but muffled voices spilled out from behind the frosted glass doors at the end. She could hear them, the laughter, the conspiratorial hush. They thought she was still downstairs, humiliated, powerless, locked out. She pushed open the doors. Conversation died mid-sentence. Head snapped toward her, eyes widening, mouths caught half open. At the head of the table sat Charles Whitaker, the CFO, white hair slicked back, suit expensive but smugness even more so. "Cassandra," he said, his voice dripping with fake warmth. "We didn't expect you so soon." She said nothing. Instead, she handed Marisol her briefcase and took out the tablet, placing it on the polished mahogany table with a soft thud. One by one, she slid the folders across the table to each stunned executive. "Effective immediately," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a hurricane wrapped in velvet, "you're all terminated." The room erupted. Protests, sputtering denials, a few desperate laughs like they might wake up from a bad dream. Cassandra didn't flinch. She watched them scramble, watched decades of privilege and arrogance dissolve in the face of a woman they thought they could shut out with a security guard and a locked door. But Cassandra Monroe had built this empire brick by brick. And today, she reminded them that she owned every single brick. For a moment after the words left her mouth, time seemed to freeze. A single breathless hush fell across the boardroom. The kind that swallows sound and thought alike. Then, like a match dropped in dry brush, it exploded. Voices clashed over each other, accusations, defenses, empty threats. Charles Whitaker rose from his chair so fast it nearly toppled backward, his thin face red with disbelief. "You can't be serious, Cassandra. You can't just waltz in here and—" She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone alone cut through the babble like a scalpel. "I can. And I just did." She turned to Marisol, who slid a stack of already prepared severance packets across the polished table, the paper's soft rustle strangely loud in the hush that followed. Cassandra's eyes scanned each familiar face, men and women who had smiled in her presence while plotting behind her back. Some had mentored her once, or pretended to. Some had laughed at the idea of her running the show, back when she was just an ambitious VP with sharper instincts than they'd ever care to admit. It was Whitaker who spoke first. Always Whitaker, the self-appointed patriarch of Monarch's old guard. He sneered at the document in front of him. "This won't hold up. You think you can override a board vote with your emergency powers clause? You'll be buried in litigation." Cassandra tilted her head slightly. "Read the clause again, Charles. Carefully." He snatched up the packet, flipping through pages with jerky fingers. Cassandra watched him skim the highlighted sections, ironclad legalese, airtight signatures, every loophole sewn shut over months of quiet, surgical preparation. For years she'd built her company, but in the shadows she'd also built her armor, hidden power plays, strategic alliances, quiet buyouts of dissenting votes. Charles slammed the packet down, his voice cracking. "This is a coup." Cassandra almost smiled, a small, cold flicker. "No, Charles. This is accountability." She gestured toward the room's floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond them, the city glittered in the early morning sun. I built Monarch Global Holdings with my vision and my name. While you and your friends were dining in private clubs and whispering about how to replace me with someone more suitable, I was expanding our markets, doubling our assets, growing this company into something none of you ever dreamed possible. She stepped closer to the table, her voice softening, but the softness held iron. And for that, you thought you could treat me like an intruder in my own house. You thought locking the door would keep me out. She let the silence settle again, heavy and deliberate. You forgot who built the door. A few seats down, Victoria Singh, the COO, cleared her throat. She had always been one of the quieter conspirators, always playing both sides, her smile polite but sharp. Now, she tried to speak with forced calm. Cass, let's not make this uglier than it has to be. You're making a scene. Cassandra's eyes flicked to Victoria, pinning her like a specimen under glass. No, Victoria. You made this ugly when you thought you could sabotage me. When you signed off on that letter to the board calling me a branding risk. When you thought being a black woman in this seat was some kind of liability to be managed. Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The others avoided Cassandra's eyes, finding sudden fascination in their coffee mugs or the patterns in the marble table. Marisol stepped forward and placed a single manila folder in front of Cassandra. Cassandra opened it, pulling out a list, a simple sheet of paper, 10 names typed in bold. She laid it flat on the table so everyone could see. This, she said, tapping the list once with her manicured finger, is your replacement. A ripple of confusion passed around the room. Whitaker scoffed. Who? A bunch of interns. Cassandra ignored him. She addressed the room like a general briefing her troops, calm, clear, final. Every name on this list is someone in this company you overlooked. You talked down to them. You cut their budgets. You stole credit for their ideas. They've been running your divisions for years while you drank overpriced scotch and laughed about what you'd do when I was gone. She let her words sink in, savoring the stunned silence. Today, they take your seats. Charles's laugh sputtered and died in his throat when he saw Cassandra's eyes, no fire, just a cold, unmovable truth. He knew then that she'd beaten them not in 10 minutes, but over 10 years, brick by brick, slight by slight, all tallied and stored like ammunition. Marisol handed each executive an envelope, final pay, NDAs, exit terms. Cassandra watched them tear them open with trembling fingers. She had given them the dignity of a soft landing, generous severance, legal cover. She didn't need to destroy them beyond this. Public humiliation was enough. The whispers would follow them into every interview, every boardroom door they knocked on next. Behind her, the new team began filtering in, young, diverse, hungry. Engineers, analysts, junior VPs who had kept Monarch's gears turning while the old guard collected accolades. They paused at the threshold of the boardroom, eyes wide as they saw their former bosses cornered like startled cattle. Cassandra turned, offered them her first real smile of the morning. Come in, she said. Your seats are ready. A memory from another life. As the old guard filed out, heads down, voices hushed, Cassandra allowed herself a moment to drift. She thought of her mother, Gloria Monroe, who used to stand at the kitchen counter of their tiny two-bedroom apartment in Detroit, patching holes in her work uniform after the late shift. She thought of all the days she'd sat at that same table doing homework while her mother murmured prayers for a better life, one where no one would ever make her daughter wait outside again. Cassandra had promised her mother, at 16, standing beside her grave in the pouring rain, no one will ever lock me out. No one will ever tell me I don't belong. And she had kept that promise, not just for herself, but for every underdog waiting their turn at the door. The last of the old guard was gone now. The new team sat stunned around the same table that had once shut them out. Some still looked at Cassandra like they couldn't quite believe it, like she was some legend stepped down from a marble pedestal. She cleared her throat, breaking the spell. You earned this. Not today, not because of what just happened. You earned it every night you stayed late. Every time you fixed their mistakes. Every time you spoke up when no one listened. She paused, letting her words settle like seeds. This is your company now. Our company. And we have work to do. A ripple of laughter broke the tension. The new COO, a young black woman named Patrice whose ideas had been buried for years, wiped away a tear and grinned at Cassandra. So, do we start with champagne or spreadsheets? Cassandra allowed herself a small, genuine laugh for the first time that day. Both, she said. But first, we tell the world. The press finds out. An hour later, Cassandra stood in the executive lobby as reporters and cameras poured through the revolving doors. Word had spread fast, a CEO staging a coup against her own C-suite was headline gold. Marisol stood at her side, phone buzzing with calls from investors, partners, even city officials wanting a comment. Cassandra stepped forward into the cluster of microphones, ignoring the flash of cameras, the barrage of shouted questions. Ms. Monroe. Is it true you fired your entire management team in 10 minutes? Will this hurt your stock price? Is Monarch stable under your leadership? Cassandra waited until the noise dipped into something like silence, then spoke, slow, clear, calm. I did what had to be done to protect this company, our employees, and our future. Monarch will always stand for opportunity, merit, and accountability. This is not chaos. This is how we grow. She glanced at Marisol, who handed her a single piece of paper, the official statement. Cassandra didn't need it. She spoke from memory, from the same fire that had carried her here from a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit. We're not going backwards, she said, her voice carrying through the lobby and out onto the busy street beyond. We're opening the doors, wider than they've ever been. By nightfall, the headlines had already spread like wildfire. CEO ousts entire board in surprise shakeup. Cassandra Monroe stuns Wall Street, Monarch restructures overnight. Corporate coup or new era? Inside Monarch's bold gamble. Cable news panels bickered over whether Cassandra was reckless or visionary. Business sites dug up old board minutes and whispered about shareholder revolts that never came. Social media, however, knew exactly what this was, a reckoning. Clips of Cassandra's press statement went viral within hours, clipped, reposted, turned into TikTok set to triumphant music. Hashtag Monroe trended by sunrise. Inside Monarch's glass tower, the real work began. Cassandra didn't bask in the noise, she stayed in the war room, sleeves rolled up beside her new team. Patrice, the newly named COO, moved through the boardroom with a confidence that hadn't been welcomed there a day before. Leo Kim, the young head of tech who once sat silent in the shadows, now outlined strategies for expansion into markets the old guard had laughed off. Cassandra listened. She didn't hover like a monarch, ironic, given the name on the building. Instead, she sat with her laptop open, taking notes, nodding along, asking questions that sliced straight to the core of every idea. Outside, protesters gathered, not against her, but for her. A cluster of young professionals, mid-career dreamers, overlooked talent from other firms who saw in Monarch's overnight revolution something worth believing in. They held up signs, opportunity for all. We are Monarch. No more locked doors. The stock price dipped at first, the headlines painted it as turmoil. But Cassandra had already prepared for that too. Days before, she'd quietly rallied her strongest investors, people who knew the firm's real backbone wasn't a few outdated executives but the army of minds they'd buried under titles like assistant manager and associate consultant. In closed-door meetings, Cassandra's voice was calm steel, you invested in me. Not them. And I'm still here. They believed her. And when the markets opened after the weekend, Monarch stock surged higher than it had in 6 months. Facing the backlash. But not everyone bent so easily. Within days, the fired executives lawyered up. Headlines flared: wrongful termination, hostile takeover, corporate drama. Paparazzi camped outside her condo, waiting for Cassandra to slip up, to break, to lose the poise they'd branded arrogant when it came from a woman who looked like her. Her PR team begged her to lay low, issue a bland statement, let the lawyers do the talking. But Cassandra knew better. She wasn't fighting just for Monarch, she was fighting for the unseen, the ones still trapped in offices where the old guard hadn't yet been cleaned out. So she didn't hide. She sat for an interview on primetime, across from a host known for tearing powerful people to shreds with a single line of snark. "Ms. Monroe, people are saying you staged a coup." She looked the host dead in the eye, not blinking once. If protecting your life's work from sabotage is a coup, then maybe more CEOs should try it. A pause. The audience laughed. The host fumbled for a follow-up. Cassandra didn't gloat, she simply folded her hands, nails neat, gaze steady. She was here to stay. A promise fulfilled. By the third week, the lawsuits collapsed one by one. The severance agreements held. The NDAs held. Cassandra's legal fortress had been built too well, too quietly, too smart. One by one, the men and women who tried to lock her out faded from the headlines, retired, pursuing other opportunities, or quietly leaving the industry altogether. Inside Monarch, the mood changed. Departments once starved of funding bloomed under fresh leadership. Ideas Cassandra had championed years ago, clean tech investments, urban community partnerships, diversity pipelines, were no longer watered down or ignored. Within 6 months, Monarch announced a new initiative. An incubator fund to back startups led by women and minorities, a seedbed for the next generation who'd never be asked to wait outside a door they built themselves.